I'm really delighted to be joining this session today, and I really appreciate being asked to talk about a subject that is very important to me, and I'm very excited to see the publishing community, not just you, but many people looking into this topic. So implicit bias is active and can be studied, but I think it's important, the most important thing about implicit bias is that everyone has biases, and it's normal. It's more important that we recognize those biases and see how they're affecting our hiring, promoting, and publishing, for example, decision-making in the workplace and in the rest of the world. So let me just start with some observations. So, you know, we have been talking about the pay gap for years, for decades, in fact, and it continues to exist. And you can have a whole webinar just on, you know, women don't ask for enough money, or maybe women, you know, have to drop out because of having children, or all kinds of excuses. But even when you balance for all sorts of career things, women in general make less money than men. And in every state, in every part of the world, in every sector, pretty much, except a very few female-dominated sectors such as teaching. So what is this about? You know, why is this still happening? We have laws in place, people have good intentions, and so we have to dig a little deeper to see why this is happening. So similarly, if we look at academia, you know, you've heard about the leaky pipeline. This is a slightly older profile showing how as you go further in your career, more and more men are representative in more senior positions in science, and fewer women as you progress through your career. Again, why is this happening? The pipeline isn't leaking, it continues to gush. And, you know, it's interesting, AWIS was founded many, many decades ago, and the Boston chapter existed in the early 70s and early 80s, but the chapter folded in the early 80s. And the reason that some of the members of the original Boston chapter told me was that, well, they felt the problem had been solved. There were laws in place for equity, everything was fine, women can go to college, and doing great in college, and you can see that women do go to college, they do well, but then they immediately start dropping out of scientific careers. So this is not something that is solved, it continues to be a problem, and so people have started to look for other reasons besides legislation or specific, you know, specific overt actions that are affecting the pipeline. It's not just in academia, of course. It's everywhere. You know, this is a company called Juniper. This was a recent headline in a local Massachusetts newspaper. Juniper's board has a greater ratio of women than any other firm in Massachusetts. That's interesting. Juniper is actually a women's health company, so you would think, you know, that it would be great. They actually have 43% women on their board, which isn't even the majority for a women's health company. So, you know, these statistics just continue to surprise me. You know, we just are not reaching equity despite decades of plenty of women going to school, especially in the life sciences. I would say in the physical sciences and computers and tech, that women are still underrepresented in the undergraduate level, but less and less all the time. They're just not staying in. So recently, you know, there's been a lot of attention paid to the atmosphere in science and in technology. And, you know, very public demonstrations of harassment. So this is a sort of famous one from a few years ago. This professor put this on Facebook. He has a lab, and he has women in his lab, and women were his friends on Facebook, the people in his lab. And he wrote, "My impressions of the conference of the Society for Neuroscience in New Orleans. There are thousands of people at the conference and an unusually high concentration of unattractive women. The supermodel types are completely absent. What is going on? Are unattractive women particularly attracted to neuroscience?" I mean, really, this guy is a professor, he's a mentor, he's bringing students, women and men, into the science community, and this is something that he would even think to put on Facebook. It's astounding, actually. And, you know, to be honest, if you look, he still has 50% women in his lab. I don't really understand that. If you Google this man's name, this episode comes up as the 5th hit. And yes, he's still studying research on the evolution of human behavior, which I actually find fairly amusing in a kind of sad way. So this is just a very public example, but the milieu, the atmosphere of science, is very hostile to women, and many women have examples of this. So you may be aware of some recent very public harassment cases. Nobel Prize winner Tim Hunt, Jeff Marcy, and many women came forward finally after years and years of these men, creating a hostile or overtly harassing in their labs. And there were repercussions, actually, in this case. These men were forced to resign, were held accountable for this really, really awful behavior. So I think overt harassment is starting to be, women are becoming braver, women and men, I should say. Everyone should be worried about harassment, should be reporting it and talking about it. When it's overt, we can't be silent anymore about these terrible things. But really, this isn't the biggest problem. It's really the more subtle, not legislatable issues that are causing the inequities and the inability to get progress for women. So overt harassment is finally starting to back